What's up, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down what's happening with the market moving forward as we have more news coming out, not to mention more economic data, and what you should be watching for as time progresses. But just note that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire community as a whole. Anyways, guys, looking at the way the market's moving, we have this bearish divergence that was developing on SPY's charts. And as a result of that, we did see a little bit of a dip right here as we approach the all-time high. I mentioned yesterday that SPY might approach all-time highs to get very close to doing so, and to watch resistance between 563 and 565. That's what happened today. We did go up to that zone, only to get that big rejection. I did warn you guys about that yesterday. There might be like a pump and dump like move. Another question is what's going to happen from here. So I want to break down the news and economic calendar for tomorrow before I break down these charts. Just note that when it comes to the news, there's been a lot of tensions between Israel, Hezbollah, Iran, and all these different parties that are involved. For the time being, tensions seem to have cooled down just a bit. They seem to be stepping back from the brink. However, it's a little bit early to make that call that we're officially, done for the time being. So for now, things are cooling off, and we'll see if this lasts. Hopefully, it does. Hopefully, there's a big ceasefire. Hopefully, that ends up being the case. We'll see. But once again, if this did develop into a massive war, this would have a bigger effect on oil and the markets. If not, if this truly is just each side sending rockets to one another, then just kind of slowing down, that could not really affect the market as much. So that would be a lot more, I would say, beneficial. Hopefully, that ends up being the case. For other pieces of news, I just want to mention that for tomorrow, it's going to be Tuesday, August 27th, 2024, at 9 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time before the market opens. We have some house price data, very minor data, might not affect the market much. But the main time to watch for volatility will be around that 10 a.m. hour. So at 10 o'clock a.m., we have consumer confidence coming out, not to mention some manufacturing and services numbers from the Fed. We have the Richmond Fed manufacturing, shipments, revenues, and such all coming out. Then we have some services data coming out at 10:30 a.m. So look for volatility at those times at 10 and 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we'll see how things go, at least from there. For other factors involved with the markets, I just want to mention that for Tuesday, which is tomorrow, we have some minor banking reports coming out. And then for Wednesday, we also have Nvidia's earnings. That's going to be a big one. That's going to be a major, major factor. So the market may be just continuing to do its thing approaching Nvidia's earnings, and we'll see how that affects us. Before tomorrow, like I said before, there's not really much coming out, very minor bank earnings, nothing too crazy. Right now, the market has neutral as the current emotion that's driving sentiment. For now, there's not really a big shift. It's kind of stuck where it was yesterday. We'll see if we become greedy or not. The market's at some tough resistance. That's where we're starting to dip a little bit. And we'll see what kind of reaction we get. Momentum is still at greedy. We'll see if that shifts or not as well. And then don't forget that the puts and call option positioning is currently at greed as well. This is starting to shift a little bit upwards. If we see a bigger decline in the markets, this may start going up as more puts start getting bought. But that depends on if we break through support or not. I'll talk about that in just a minute. And then volatility is also neutral. The VIX is not really doing much, so we have to give that some time. Last thing I want to talk about is this right here. There's about a 68% chance according to the markets that we get a 25 basis point cut and 32% chance we get a 50 basis point cut. That's a 100% probability of us getting a cut in September. Any kind of cut, whether it's 25 or 50 basis points. Jerome Powell confirmed that this is most likely going to be the case. That's part of why the market is elevated the way it is. But the question is, how will things progress from here? And the answer is we pushed and pushed. But one thing I mentioned to you guys yesterday was that every time historically SPY hit 563 to 565, we did reject. That does not mean we have to reject every single time, but just shows that this is a very, very heavy level. It's very tough resistance, very, very close to the all-time high. Look how SPY hit 562, it came down, went up to 563, came down, went back up, came down, went back up, came down. So it's just shuffling in this range so far. SPY is technically range bound. We're not officially bullish unless we break the all-time high. I think if all-time highs break, SPY could see a big rally to the upside towards 568 if we break 565. If we're bearish, you want to see SPY lose this support, the low down here in this 555 to 556 area. If we lose this 556 zone all the way down here, I see this potentially dipping to much lower levels, such as 552, 550, and then all the way down to start filling some gaps into the 540s. So it's going to be a big decline if we end up losing 555. That's going to be our critical support. So watch for that very carefully. So what are we doing? We're still range bound on SPY. We haven't lost 555 to 556 as our support to really start dumping, and we haven't broken past all-time highs to turn bullish. We're just in the middle. I presume what's going to happen is this. Looking at the charts, the last time we hit this green line, this is our 20 EMA at 556. We came down, then we bounced off of it. We're approaching the green support at the 20 EMA again. So I think tomorrow what's going to happen is we're going to likely try to dip a little bit more towards 558. We could even touch the low 558s, even get a little bit below that. But we might see some buyers try to defend and bring us back up within the range. So I think we're going to see some range bound price action, a little bit of a dip tomorrow before we try to get bought back up with some consolidation. That's what I'm seeing for tomorrow. I think the real moves are going to be coming on Wednesday and Thursday when we have a lot of data and Nvidia's earnings. That's going to be the big market moving catalyst, in my opinion. For Nvidia, we're just range bound right now. And I was talking about this yesterday as well. We have this 130 areas resistance. If we break the 132s, we're looking for 135. And if we lose 122, we're going to be looking for a big dip all the way down towards 117, down to this imbalance. Now we're just range bound right now. We're kind of stuck in the middle. So we'll just have to see which way we end up going. Now, in my personal opinion, I think there's a good chance that we do end up continuing this shuffle. We might pop a little bit in the morning towards 128 and make our move back down and just continue to trade sideways. That's all I'm seeing from Nvidia. And I think we're going to likely continue to remain range bound. There's not really much going on with it for now until we get to earnings. Now, Bitcoin's looking a little bit more bearish. That could be a signal for the markets. Notice that we lost our 20 EMA on the 4-hour time frame at 63,345. If we don't hold above that, the odds are favoring us dipping all the way down towards 62,500 and eventually 62,000 flat. So we look a little bit more bearish on Bitcoin, forming a double top rate over here and losing support at the 20 EMA. That looks a little bit more bearish to me. ES has the same structure as SPY. So notice that we weren't able to really hold above this resistance. I said this yesterday. We might get close to about 55.80 and maybe reject. We came a little bit short of that target before getting that rejection. So now we're looking at 56.30 as resistance and 56.50. Our support's at 5600 flat. My gut is telling me this might dip a little bit more closer to 5600 and try to bounce and just continue to remain range bound. That's all ES is doing alongside SPY. I think that's what's going to end up being the case. SPX has the same structure. It's just pretty much just range bound. We went up to this resistance at 5640, came back down, and then we have this nice support down here around the 5600 and 5580 area. So I'll be watching that very carefully just to see how things move. But we're just range bound on SPX as well. For Tesla, we're looking a little bit weaker because we're making lower highs. We're actually getting these big red bars, which is not the best of signs. This also kind of resembles an inverse cup and handle that could be forming as well for the shorter term time frame. So notice we had that high at 228. We came down, made a lower high at 225, came down. Then even today we made a lower high. So we're continuing to downtrend and we're continuing to see some weakness developing. I might be able to just redraw this like this if I have to, but just to be very, very frank with everyone, we're still looking more bearish. For Tesla, we're going to be looking at resistance at this 217 area. If we reclaim that, we could try to bounce the trend line. And if we don't break 215 and then 217, we'll be looking at 212 as support. If that fails us, we're looking for 210, 208, and if 208 fails us, we're going to be looking for a big drop in Tesla down to 202. So with the inverse cup and handle, this does look a little bit more bearish. It depends on if we could hold above 210 or not. If we lose that, I think the odds will favor a bigger drop. Tomorrow we might touch 210 and we'll see if we bounce or not off of it. So look for a little bit of a dip and we'll see if Tesla holds support. But technicals do look a little bit more bearish for Tesla for the time being, especially as we get those big rejections. That's also following NQ as we're getting these rejections. Now NQ has a head and shoulders like structure, but just know that these could sometimes be traps. If we break past 19,700, we could turn back up. If we end up losing support over here around this 19,500 area, we could be looking for a bigger drop towards our 200 EMA. But I presume that 19,400 is the main level, the 200 EMA. If we lose that, then yes, I think the head and shoulders will play out, and we're going to be looking for a big drop towards the lower 19,000s, if not the high 18,000s quite easily. But if we hold 19,400, we could try to rebound. My guts tells me the head and shoulders may end up playing out, and this might start dipping, so be very careful with NQ. It still has that risk of the downside. For the QQQ, we also look a little bit weaker right here. We're going to be looking at our resistance around this 475 area. We have support at 473. I would say another support to watch is going to be close to 472. This 472 to 473 area is going to be key because now our 50 EMA is playing a game of catch up. So we're going to be looking at that very carefully. If we hold 472 to 473, we could try to hold on the QQQ. If we lose that area, this head and shoulders could play out, and I think there's going to be a bigger drop into the 460s. If we lose the 472 to 473 area, we're going down to 468, 465, and much lower levels. Namely, this imbalance would take us down to like 464. So the QQQ looks more bearish. We have a head and shoulders like structure, looking like we're showing some weakness, but we haven't lost critical support for confirmation. To turn back up, you want to break past 478, but this chart is favoring downside. We had this high here, came down, made a lower high, came down. So it's favoring a move to 472, and we'll see if that holds. If not, we're going to be looking for a dump. Now, even if we do dip, guys, don't turn overly bearish. We still have Nvidia's earnings coming up on Wednesday. That's going to be the big catalyst to determine if this will drop or not. For Aapl, we're just consolidating, going back and forth and back and forth. We have 228 as resistance. If we break that, we're going up to 230. If we lose 223, excuse me, guys, as our support, if 223 breaks, we're going all the way down to at least 222, then eventually 220. So Aapl is stuck within a range between 223.8 and then 228, going back and forth and back and forth. I presume it's just going to continue to consolidate. Maybe it dips a bit tomorrow, makes its way back up, and just continues. Not really doing much. It's just range bound until we see a break. With that being said, guys, those are like the more detailed technical analysis updates I tend to go over for the main five. Now I'm just going to focus on the rest of them, be a little bit more blunt. So with Palantir, I said yesterday this is looking a little bit more bearish off this divergence, and that's playing out very nicely. If we reclaim 30.9, we turn back up. If not, if we lose 30.5, we turn more bearish. This is looking more bearish to me because we lost support. Now, if we don't hold above 30.9, I see this dipping all the way down to 30.5, and then this imbalance takes us down to about 29.5. So it looks a little bit more bearish to me. This is favoring the downside. For Supermicro, we had this range to watch for. I thought this thing would kind of pop a bit and start dipping. Instead, we didn't. We dipped even more than what I was expecting. I was thinking we would kind of like hold around the range to 600. We actually lost 600. That opened the doors for the bigger drop. So look at resistance at 580. And our main support is going to be right here around 550. If 550 does not hold, or if we don't end up holding it, if we test it tomorrow, we're going to be dipping all the way down to about the 520 area. I mean, resistance at 576 to 580. So I presume we might retest 580, then start dipping down lower and continuing this bearish trend as we look more bearish after forming that very, very weak looking candlestick. For Rivian, where we attempted to break out, my prediction yesterday was we would push a little bit higher than come back down. We got the push up higher, but we haven't come down all the way yet. This might dip a little bit more tomorrow, get very close to about 14 flat, and we'll see if we get a bounce off that or not. This could still be a nice breakout, but we might need to dip a little bit first before we continue higher after such a bullish day on Friday. For SoFi, we look more bullish, holding it very nicely, but we're approaching this resistance right here around this 7.8 area. If that breaks, we're going up to 8. If not, we're coming back down to 7.5. We pushed a bit towards that only to dip a little bit. In my opinion, if we don't continue, there's going to be a risk of 7.5. I might be looking for a dip to 7.5, and we'll see if it bounces to continue higher or not. I'll be watching that level very carefully. For the IWM Russell 2000, we were riding this trend line up and up and up and up, and then notice that we hit 222. Once we hit 222, this thing ended up getting a little rejection, so it's looking a little bit weaker right now. Can we hold 220? If we don't hold 220, I think we could get very close to 217 to 218. And if we hold above 220, we'll be looking for 222. My gut tells me this might dip a little bit, all the way down to lower levels if 220 fails us. We'll be looking for a move all the way down towards that 217 to 218 area. So I think there's a good chance that the IWM may dip. So watch and see if that ends up being the case. The Russell does have a risk with that, so be very, very mindful of that. There might be more downside coming all the way down to 220 then 217. For AMD, if we reclaim 152, we're going to be looking for a test of this trend line back up. And if we reject right over here and we end up losing 149, we're going to be dipping all the way down to at least 145. Now, it's worth mentioning that we had this high right here. We came down, made a lower high, we came down, and we came back to the trend line only to reject. So that is what I was talking about yesterday, how we might test this trend line and we'll be watching to see if you reject. We tested that only to reject exactly as predicted. So if we lose 149, look for a dip. It does look a little bit more bearish to me. It's barely holding support, but I see a risk of it dipping all the way down towards 147.5, if not lower, down to 145. So I'll be watching those levels just to be safe. For ARM basically pushed all the way up towards our 200 EMA towards 138 only to get a big rejection. So with this big red bar that formed, this could be forming a bearish engulfing candle that takes us even lower. Now, what generally happens is when we form these, we try to rebound a bit, then we continue lower. So look at resistance at 129.5 and 131. look at support at 125. I think what might happen is we push a little bit higher to these EMAs, then we continue lower, all the way down towards 125. I think that's the most likely possibility. ARM may form a little bit of a dip here, especially because of the fact that we have this bearish looking candlestick. So it looks a little bit like it's going to dip more. So look for a retest of our EMAs and then a continuation lower to the mid 120s. For Coinbase, I just want to mention that we got this big rejection right here. The 4 hours looking a little bit more bearish to me. This is favoring downside a little bit more. If we don't hold above 203, we're going to likely come all the way down to 200, if not 197 or below. If we turn back up, if we hold above 205, I'll be looking for 208, followed by the 210s. My guts tells me this is looking weaker, and we're going to be coming down to at least 200, if not 197. Amazon looks a little bit weaker to me. The first red flag is the fact that we lost the big white trend line. So I want to keep that there so you guys can see this. We had support here. Remember this big white line we had? We bounced, and now we broke through it. That's the first red flag. The second thing is it's a head and shoulders like structure. And then we ended up losing our 50 EMA. So that's a sign that this is going to be coming down to this imbalance all the way down to 172, which suggests downside is coming. Meta is also dipping a bit. We had this bearish divergence, a little bit of a dip. I think that we got to reclaim 522 to go up to 527. If we don't get back above 522, I think that we're easily going to be coming down to 515 again, if not all the way down towards 508. So be careful, guys. There's a risk of downside for Meta. For Microsoft, it's the same setup. We had a bearish divergence that was developing. And then this is looking like it's getting a rejection. We need to get back above at least 414 to turn back up. Otherwise, we're at risk of dipping to this imbalance. I could be looking for basically this 408 area. So I see a risk of 408. I see a risk of downside for Microsoft. So I'll be watching to see if that ends up being the case. For Google, Google's just range bound right now. I just want to say it's completely range bound. It was trying to break a key level, but I'm just going to say this. Watch 168. If we crack that, we're going up to 170. If not, we dip down to 166. So as of right now, it looks a little bit more range bound. It is showing a little bit of life compared to others out there. But I just want to note that there's weakness developing on Google nonetheless. So I want to say that in order for us to break out, we haven't broken 168 to really start pushing higher. And I'll be watching to see if this ends up being the case. So be very patient. So give this as much time as it needs. And if 168 breaks for Google, we will turn back up. Otherwise, there's a risk of us dipping. I just think it's going to be range bound. For GameStop, it looks bearish. We were calling it some downside yesterday. And lo and behold, we got this dip. I think it may dip all the way down to about 20.8. AMC is dipping a bit. I think we're going to be testing 5.03 tomorrow. If that breaks, 4.97 is coming. If that holds, we bounce, but it's still looking more bearish. For DJT, in my personal opinion, we're coming down to this imbalance. If we break past 22.88, we turn back up. Otherwise, we're going to continue to dip. And I presume it's going to be dipping lower, a little bit lower towards 21.36. We'll see if it holds support there or not. If it doesn't hold this, we're going down to 20. If we hold this, we could try to bounce. So look for a little bit more upside, and we'll see if we bounce at support. The VIX is trying to push just a bit. We haven't broken our key resistance levels to get a breakout. This shows the market is not officially breaking out. The VIX also happens to have like a head and shoulders like structure. So is the VIX going to like push higher and then start dumping? Could it be that Nvidia's earnings is going to cause the market to, pump later on? I'm not sure, guys. So we'll be watching the VIX here. If we have a possible head and shoulders, is the VIX about to do something like this where we kind of push tomorrow? Maybe the market dips a little bit more. And then once we get Nvidia's earnings, we see this end up kind of dumping like this. And then that takes the market higher, and then this ends up dumping like this. So that could just mean that this is a temporary dip, and the market's about to get a big bounce after Nvidia's earnings. Maybe, not a guarantee, but that's what the VIX kind of suggests. The 10-year is kind of flat, not really doing much. There's not really anything to worry about with that. The dollar index is trying to push a little bit. We're approaching resistance at 101.04 or 20 EMA. So we'll see how it ends up reacting. Anyways, guys, that's pretty much it for my video. There's not really a whole lot else that's happening to the markets. I anticipate we may dip a little bit more closer to our 20 EMA. This is going to be a very, very key support for SPY. We'll see what kind of reaction we get. So watch for that very carefully tomorrow. We could dip a little bit below it and then get bought back up. That's the most likely possibility as we're just range bound on SPY. And the market is likely going to see a similar move. Tech is showing some weakness though. If you look at Amazon, Meta, and lots of big tech stocks, I'm seeing weakness developing, and that could drag the market a little bit lower temporarily. But the big catalyst that's going to determine if we get a bigger dump or not is going to be Nvidia's earnings, in my opinion. So I'll be watching to see how that ends up going. But with that being said, be very patient until the day comes. I thank you all so much for listening. Hope you guys have a great day. Enjoy your day, night, or evening, wherever you guys are around the world. And I'll see you guys tomorrow for another update on the markets. As a reminder, we have very minor data before the market opens. The serious data comes out after the market opens. So I'll be back to talk about it tomorrow. Until then, have a great night and peace out.